Welcome to my studio. I'm Nico Meyer, an artist based in Pretoria, South Africa. For years, my creative work lived entirely on flat surfaces, from digital screens and paper to canvases. Then, less than 2 years ago, I picked up 3D printing for the first time to step into the world of sculpture. For the design phase, I started in Tinkercad just to explore a few initial ideas, but the project quickly took over. The real challenge began when I tried to get the model out. Because I had pushed Tinkercad way past its limits, exporting it was a nightmare. I had to export the model in 15 separate sections, rebuild it in Meshmixer, and finally bring it into Chitubox to get the files ready for printing. My print setup is simple. An entry-level desktop resin printer running water-washable resin. With no dedicated wash or cure station, I rely on what we have in abundance here, the bright South African sun. In total, this whale required 23 large structural pieces and a whole army of smaller detail parts. All in all, it took about 180 hours of non-stop printing time and about 1.9 liters of resin. With printing done, it's time for the tedious part, cleaning. I use a scalpel to remove the support, then sand everything down. To bond the main structural parts together, I start with normal CA glue to hold them in place, but to truly fuse them, I apply the exact same 3D resin and cure it with a handheld UV torch. This essentially welds the resin into one solid piece. I am hollowing out dedicated slots where the LEDs will eventually sit. Drilling holes so the lights inside the fins can shine through. I also need to open up the fins so I can cleanly route the lighting inside. Stick around to the end to see all the tricks that brought this build together. To keep the whale from being one giant, unmanageable piece, I designed the fins to be detachable. I use magnets to hold them in place, which also double as electrical conductors to pass power to the lights. During this stage, I'm cutting channels to clear a path for the wiring later on. When painting, I actually skip primer entirely. I've found that lacquer paint fuses directly with the resin. This is a massive advantage. It allows me to sand the surface back down, apply more resin for assembly, and repaint without a layer of primer getting in the way. On top of the rose gold lacquer base, I use acrylics to color the individual parts. I stick to a limited palette of just 3 acrylic shades for the design. I start with a metallic silver. Next, I mix red and gold to create a rich metallic orange. For the rest of the details, I use a custom blended green. I apply dark acrylic washes to bring out the depth and contrast. I use the green again as a wash, mimicking the natural verdigris patina that builds up on copper over time. Layer by layer, I build up with more washes to achieve a heavily weathered look. Finally, I paint the smaller detail pieces. I didn't want to rely solely on CA glue to initially join the 2 main parts, so I created a hinge to lock them together. For the illuminated sections, I use clear UV resin to seal the drill holes. The goal is to create a hidden window for the LEDs, making the lights completely invisible when they are turned off. Where the internal cavities were a bit too large, I used tiny pieces of acetate film as a barrier, keeping the liquid resin from flooding the entire chamber before curing. To some parts, I apply a black base first to block any unwanted light. I'm using standard fairy lights I bought online. To test their durability, I twisted, bent, and pulled them mercilessly before installation, and I'm seriously impressed by how much abuse they can take. So I feel completely confident using them in this build. To get the perfect red glow, I use a solvent-based glass paint, which requires 2 full coats and plenty of drying time. To power the lights via USB, I wired in a small resistor to drop the voltage slightly, dim the glow, and prevent overheating. Since none of the LEDs are completely encapsulated anyway, they all have breathing space, so heat buildup is 0. I use clear UV resin to bond the LEDs directly into place. In total, between the whale and the base, I'm installing 18 strands of lights. That's over 360 individual LEDs packed into this piece. I mark the compartments to designate which sections get red light versus white. This is the scratch build phase. I hunted around for various scrap plastics to house the LEDs. Luckily, I realized just in time that you have to be careful with scraps. Some plastics are oily and paint simply won't stick to them long term. I am using a metallic copper acrylic on the housings. It diffuses just enough light to create a perfect warm glow. I cut small screens to cover up the exposed LEDs. I have to paint each LED individually as I go, matching the red color to the specific sections of the layout. Plastic googly eyes make the perfect interior light fixtures. I cut them open, drop the LEDs inside, and mount them to the walls. I cut out plastic backings to completely enclose the housings. This seals the unit so you never see a bare LED. first half done, I repeat the entire process for the opposite side of the whale. I cut down an old plastic syringe, using the front part as a housing for a cluster of LEDs, sealing it with the plunger tip to create a bright plug-and-play eye fixture. More googly eyes to fabricate the dome light fixtures. To build a much larger light cluster, I am pairing an old plastic shot glass with a salvaged lid that happens to fit perfectly, creating a clean, custom enclosure. I'm sanding the metal magnet caps for better contact when soldering. A quick tip if you try this: never solder directly onto a magnet, as the heat will completely destroy its magnetism. Instead, I solder the wires to the metal caps first, then secure the magnets inside with CA glue. Getting the fins flush and ensuring the magnets made perfect contact was easily one of the trickiest parts of the build. It took a massive loop of constant adjustments just to get everything to line up and pass power to the lights. Next, I am running the internal wiring, bringing all the different LED strands together to tie into a single power point. With the structure complete, it's time to start on the details. I am placing dozens of individual miniature men, gears, and components one by one. After having to break the rib pieces to get inside for the internal lighting, it's time to repair them. I'm bonding them back together with resin, then blending the seams with a quick sand and paint. Every great sculpture needs a proper foundation. I needed a custom stand that could support the weight while allowing the wires to run cleanly down into the lightbox base. I found these aluminum tube offcuts. One fits exactly inside the other. Instead of just running the main support straight into the wooden base, I created a sleeve so the sculpture can slide in neatly. Once again, I use the same UV resin to fill the gaps and bond all the pieces together. Where the joints were slightly uneven, I built up the resin layer by layer until the surface was perfectly flush. To illuminate the whale's mouth, I first create a template to ensure a perfect fit. I use clear recycled plastic, thoroughly sanding and painting it with acrylic washes to diffuse the light. With the sanding done, I touch up the seams with the rose gold lacquer to blend everything together. To really bring the parts together as one, I add a central light and I fabricate a railing, making it a single cohesive piece. I finish the wiring inside the fins. Closing up the fins using only UV resin. For the wooden lightbox, no specialized tools were needed. Just off-cut MDF that happened to match my base footprint perfectly. Just basic carpentry here. It's a simple, open-faced box with internal supports to ensure the tube sleeve sits snug and sturdy. I fill the holes with wood filler. I built up 3 coats of wood primer, each one taking an eternity to dry. Sanding between each coat. Adding the details. And finishing with black paint. To finish things off, I add felt to the bottom to protect surfaces from scratching. To illuminate the base panel, I'm mounting the internal lights onto a recycled piece of plastic. By drawing a grid on paper first, I easily transfer a uniform layout for the LEDs. To get a soft, even glow, I repurposed some leftover packaging foam as a diffuser. It's time for the final details. I'm touching up the entire sculpture with acrylics. I check the LEDs one last time. If a spot is too bright, I apply an extra layer of copper paint to dim it to the right intensity. Now I'm finishing the base using acrylic paint washes to build up an authentic aged look. Finally, I seal the entire piece with a satin clear coat to protect the finish and unify the sheen. That completes the Mariner's shadow. If you appreciated the process, hit subscribe to support the channel. Your support helps immensely as I work toward taking this channel full time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next build.